You're listening to Brainwork Framework, a business and marketing podcast, brought to you by focus-biz.com.
Business owners, entrepreneurs, and brands who are looking to grow their social media presence to the next level and actually want to get meaningful sales and engagement from their viewers. It's all about creating content that is educating, it is entertaining, and it is inspiring. With us today is John Bohan from Social Ties. He's the CEO and founder, and they focus on creating content that actually builds and elevates brands. So we're so excited to get some insider information from him today. John, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Of course, absolutely. So you have this 30 years of experience. You've been in the game. You've worked with tons of clients, small and big, mostly big. But tell us more about your entrepreneurial journey. How did you even get started into creating your own business, and where did it start? Where did you take it to?
I think I started in the entrepreneurial ventures like most entrepreneurs, probably early on. When I was a young kid, I had a paper route. I remember I sold lemonade. I sold blueberries in Maine door to door once. So it always seemed like a good way to make some money and have a little bit of fun. But then I worked in cable television to begin my career. And, I always felt there was a better way to do things than where I was working at the time. I worked at the Weather Channel and the USA Networks, which were both great companies. But I felt that there's a better, faster, quicker way to do things. So I got into the internet actually in 1994 originally, before there was even Netscape. So I ended up running a sweepstakes on bulletin boards where people actually needed to know some code to get around. So I started out there, and it just grew pretty quickly with a dot com boom. I was able to raise a lot of money and built one of the first advertising platforms out there. I think we were probably one of the top five in the early days in the late 90s and early 2000s. So that was how I got in.
Wow, that is so exciting. Now, your ability to see these opportunities as they come and take advantage of them, is this something natural that comes to you, or were you given insider information about this dot-com boom that's coming? We need to capitalize on this. Has that been kind of a focus on some of the initiatives or opportunities that you take advantage of?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things I don't do well, but one of the things that I do well is I have a instinct on what's going to happen next, especially within advertising and media. I guess I can prove that because I did jump into the internet in 1994 and saw that being a great advertising and marketing and communication vehicle. So I think that's an intuition of mine. I then got into social media in 2007, was one of the first companies to advertise on Facebook in a big way, started running media. I think it was 2009 that we actually started running media, which was early days. Got into the creator economy or influencer marketing, probably originally in 2012, but then more officially in 2015. And now it's interesting. It's more about the creator economy. It's more about social media and how AI plays a part of that. So we're focusing on that end of the business now. I can get more into detail on that. So yeah, I think instinct and jumping on trends before they occur is something that I've done well.
Absolutely. And especially in marketing where trends and channels are always shifting, it's important to stay ahead of the game and be forward thinking when it comes to technology and how are we going to utilize this? How are businesses going to benefit from it? One thing you mentioned is the creator economy or influencers. Is that what the creator economy is? Is just your average person creating content for others to consume and enjoy and monetizing that?
It's a good question because sometimes the word creator economy and influencer marketing is used interchangeably, and sometimes it's not. So it's an evolving definition because it's still relatively new. But I would say the creator economy by Goldman Sachs's definition is anything where there's more of a regular person or consumer creating content in some capacity, most often for social or for the web. And that could include a content creator or blogger. It could also include an influencer with millions in following. So it's not that highly scripted advertising agency, radio commercial, print ad, or TV commercial, or anything created by the large agencies, but it's in the traditional capacity, but it's more using regular people, quote unquote, to develop the content.
That's fascinating. I was really excited to see that more of your Joe Schmo people had these opportunities to become millionaires and create their own financial future. When did this all start? Was this kind of that shift in around 2010 when social media was becoming more popular? Was there a distrust for your typical Hollywood movies and content and news media that people didn't want that anymore? Or was it just more human to connect with people we were familiar with?
Yeah, I think there's always been that connection of working with people who we're familiar with, and it's been evolving over some time. I mean, remember Friendster back in the day before MySpace. There was also GeoCities, which I actually worked at back in 1995, 94. It sold to Yahoo for $5 billion at the time. But that was the creation of these cities and content within the internet. And so those were the early days. MySpace certainly took a run at it of people creating their own content and others connecting with others with like interest, evolving into Facebook and so on and so on. So out of that comes the creators that actually are more talented. So as you have tens of millions and hundreds of millions and now billions of people creating content every day, there's a percentage, small percentage, but a large number that actually creates really compelling content and they get more viewers. And you've seen that with what's happened with TikTok and Instagram Reels. And there's those people that are more talented in their particular niches. And that's where I guess the creator economy and influencer marketing is really hatched and grown into. You mentioned an interesting point, distrust of large advertising budgets showed there's a lot of moving parts. And any when you see something really big that's happened, it's oftentimes there's a trifecta of things, at least. So one of the things is social media, right? So it's a breaking down of the media walls where people can connect with people on a one-on-one basis. You don't need to go through these highly controlled environments like a radio station or television or a print magazine. So that's one thing. Social has grown so ridiculously fast. The other thing is distrust of government, distrust of the big machine. There's always been distrust of that, but not to get on my soapbox, but there's just a factual distrust of the government more and more and more for a variety of reasons, and the corporations as well. So I'd rather listen to the little guy, and we've seen that, and that's I won't go into too much in it. So that's the other thing that's happened. And then on top of that, the ability for these creators to create amazing content with the technology that's evolved through the iPhone and other mediums and through Premiere and now through AI. So you have these incredibly powerful tools in the hands of a really talented artist, for example, a really talented blogger of sorts. So yeah, there's been a massive growth for all of those reasons.
John, that was exactly the answer I was kind of hoping for. It was absolutely perfect. I grew up in the MySpace days where we all became low level coders because we were putting in HTML so we could customize our own profile page. And that was really cool. And to see the evolution as things change. But you mentioned just the distrust for the large government, large corporations, and that has existed. I mean, look at the 60, movements in the 60s and all throughout history. Honestly, they're doing it to themselves. If they were more trustworthy, they would earn our respect right back. But it's funny to see the landscape of content changing because you have these normal people creating content or trying to be more like the bigger news media. They're using some lower thirds, some fun graphics, some editing styles. But then you also have the big corporations who don't want to look like a big corporation. They're creating more personalized content, something that looks more homemade, that doesn't use all of the tools in their arsenal. So it's kind of interesting to see that shift in the landscape. But buyers and people are getting smarter. They know how to recognize this content. They have a BS meter that kind of goes off and tells them, hey, this is good or this is bad. But within the content strategy that you create for the brands and companies, you mentioned that you want to educate, entertain, and also inspire. Is that kind of the trifecta behind creating great content? Or are you boosting memes? Or are you creating sort of lead magnets? What's your strategy behind creating a positive brand within social media?
Yeah, 100%. I think you're spot on all those comments, by the way, Chris. And it's funny that you're an early day MySpace guy. Yeah, I think that it's interesting that brands see what the creator economy is doing, right? So they want to be more like them. Our strategy is really short form video. I think that is where most of the attention is. And I think it's the easiest way to gain interest among users. So TikTok, it's Instagram Reels, it's YouTube Shorts. Those are the main areas that we focus. And what we look to do is create relatable content. I think that's a key word to think about if you're a big brand or you're an up and coming, solopreneur is how can my content be relatable? How can it connect? If I were speaking to somebody at a cocktail party, would I use a lot of big words and would I stand up my soapbox? And probably not. People wouldn't listen to you. It's think of yourself as connecting within a living room setting. You're not on a stage. If you're on television, it's almost as if you can be on a stage and be grandiose. The consumer is good 10, 12, 15 feet away from you. They're leaning back. Social, it's 6 inches from your face. You are in an intimate conversation. So it's how can we be intimate yet the attention span is so short these days, is how every second counts. And so as we think about creating content, 40% of the success of any content in social media that's video oriented, in my opinion, is in the hook. It's in that first 3 seconds. And how can you capture that person's attention in 3 seconds and then maintain that attention for as long as you can? If it's TikTok or YouTube Shorts or Instagram Reels, you're in that somewhere between 30 and 90 seconds. If it's YouTube, it's a longer term viewing experience. But that is our MO right now, is how do we help brands to connect with short form video?
I love that. Just the fact that you've been in business for so long, many people may have the perception that you would be bringing old school tactics to the table, that maybe you're trying to offer someone a Val pack or a printed coupon that gets mailed out to people. But you were actually in the trenches when the internet first started, and you've stayed on top of all the trends that are happening. I'm seeing everyone going into short form video, and I feel that's been more popular, specifically the last 4 years since COVID. We were stuck at home. We started consuming more content in different ways. It's just interesting to see the landscape changing, but to congratulate you for actually staying on top of all these trends as they shift. What are you seeing in the next 3 to 5 years as content strategy changes, as social media changes? Is there anything that's kind of on the forefront of your mind? Or is it just we're going to take it as we come and play it as it goes?
One thing that I've been guilty of in the past is I've begin to talk about, and I will tell you what's on what I think about in 3 to 5 years, but it's really it's not so much what's happening in 3 to 5, because I've oftentimes been in the 3 to 5 year space. And one thing you can't do in business is be too far ahead of the curve. If anything, we're guilty of being too far ahead of the curve than we are lagging behind. And so what is really hot right now is how brands can connect in social media. And yeah, is that new? No. But 3, 4 years ago, it was ahead of the curve because there wasn't the dollars pouring into it. The brands haven't felt the pain of the ineffectiveness of their other marketing until fairly recently. So where we are right now is how do we help them connect in social for the short form videos, and how does the creator economy play a role in that? So you had mentioned earlier that the brands, and again, whether you're a small business person or you're a large brand, you need to be relatable and you need to have content that connects. But at the same time, you need to be able to sell your products and services. So the key game is, how do I sell my products and services, but still entertain, educate, or inspire? And there are a number of ways to do that. And what we've done is we've vetted what we found to be the best brands in social media. And you say, okay, John, what are the best brands in social media? Percentage wise, they're very small, but in number, they're very large. I mean, if you take a look at, I'll just mention a few so it doesn't get too confusing, but Dunkin' Donuts, I think, is doing an amazing job. They're doing it as well as anybody. Because on the one hand, they can say, yeah, we're a big brand. We can play with the big boys. We got Ben Affleck, we got Tom Brady, we have Jennifer Lopez in our TV commercials. But we can also be, I don't want to say down and dirty, but we can also be UGC oriented. The commercial in the Oscars was very down to earth. It was all about entrepreneurship. It was user generated content, which means that it's just a person shooting with an iPhone. That's what it felt like. And you go to their site, you see behind the scenes with Tom Brady and Affleck and Matt Damon. But then again, you see these quirky little memes and that type of thing. So they're balancing both ends. And I think as a small business person as well, which may be a good portion of your audience, you kind of need to do the same thing. You need to be entertaining. You need to be kind of down to earth. You can do the memes. You can do the stuff that is just off the cuff, although you've practiced it. You're still walking down the street, you're giving a little bit of a tip. But then maybe do some stuff that's more polished, some stuff that's more studio oriented to elevate your professionalism. Everything, especially as a small business, you also want to have that very polished feel so people felt trust on both ends. But more and more, people want to do business with other people. If you're just all very professional and tip after tip after tip and everything cut is very good, they're not going to get to know you. So one way to do that is to be much more informal in stories to begin with, and then move that to your feed.
I love those strategies. When it comes to people who are trying to build their short form content, they're starting with videos. Maybe they don't have experience with this or they're ready to actually take it seriously. What would be your advice to them? I know you mentioned creating something with the hook, something within 3 seconds that pulls them in. Talk about being human. Are there any other tips and tricks that, hey, we've seen that this strategy is pretty consistent, or make sure you include a jump cut at 15 seconds? Are there any other tips that you can share with others to help elevate their social media presence?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest thing to focus on is the hook. I mean, I was chatting with my team. I said we could write a whole book just on the hook, and we might. But there are certain things. One thing that doesn't work is just coming out and talking about my product and service. Now, if you have a warm audience and they're familiar with you, sure, you've already gained that credibility. It's like talking to an old friend, and there's a lot more you can say there. But to a cold audience or someone doesn't know you very well, you need to come up with better ways. And one of those ways is to ask a question. Emirates, the airline, does this really well. Is they don't just tell you about their first class service. They'll start with a question. They'll say, "Is first class on Emirates worth it?" And then they answer it. It's just such an easier way to go. Somebody asked them a question, they did. But another thing is, do you remember the Old Spice commercials where it's "I'm a man on a horse"? Okay. So that's just doing something weird. And the reason why those commercials were still so good is it's like, who's this guy man on a horse, right? So you're intrigued. You need to answer why. So depends on your personality, but something weird up front is captivating as well. Another thing is give away the ending right at the beginning. With television, the climax comes at the end of a 30-second commercial. Oftentimes you don't even know who the ad's about. With social, you can say, "I'm going to solve the greatest math problem you've ever seen." Okay. So, okay. Now, as a viewer, it's like, what's he doing? So you're giving away the beginning, or you're giving the end, the climax at the beginning, kind of, or you're asking a question and creating an intrigue. And then you got to go ahead and deliver the details later. You could also make a big statement like OpenAI has just launched Sora and it's going to change everything. You got to just kind of lead them. So there's a lot of things like that in the hooks that if you, and this is going to be a plug, but I mean, I'm just trying to answer the question. If the viewers follow me on Instagram at the John Bohan, so it's at the John Bohan on Instagram, we're constantly giving away a lot of tips and tricks around hooks.
I love that. And I also love self promo. That was going to be my follow up question. Where can people find out more about you? You have Instagram. Can you share more about your other channels you love people to connect with you on?
Yeah, that'd be great. I think Instagram is the main one so it's the John Bohan, and then LinkedIn is John Bohan. So those are the two core ones that I'm marketing. To be quite candid, Chris, I've been doing this for so long. I've never really marketed myself, and it's a huge mistake. So I just really started back in, I think it was November, but we're planning to ramp pretty quickly. So we're putting up 5 posts a week, often nearly talking about how to market yourself better in social media. We also have an AI repository that they can access by going to Instagram. If not, just DM me there. And there's 125 tools that you can use across all different types of areas in terms of images, copywriting, strategy, et cetera.
I love that. John, you're focused on providing value, you're educating people and creating this irresistible lead magnet. I want 125 AI tools that are going to help me scale my business. That sounds amazing. And there's nothing wrong with feeling like you're coming late to the game in any social media platform. Even myself, so I'm 34 years old. I just now have a TikTok. Just now. I heard the government was going to ban it. I was like, well, now I want it. You're going to ban it? I'm going to get it now. And same for Instagram. I don't have one yet, but it's okay to come late into these channels. Even for myself, I'm just starting YouTube, although I've been talking about it for a decade. But it's never too late to get into these channels and actually take action from them. You're providing great content. I'm sure your follower list is just by the tens and hundreds each day. People want this information. They want to connect. and you're exactly the person people are going to look up to for that advice. What is one tip or trick that you want to share with other entrepreneurs? Something that you failed at or don't want them to make the same mistake, or if you could do it over again, this is exactly what I would change.
I think the biggest challenge for an entrepreneur is focus and consistency. I have run a lot of businesses. I told you about the internet advertising business, which I ended up raising $100 million for that and had a staff of 250. But the reason I was able to do that was there were two things. I guess it's focus and it's timing. The focus was I said, I'm an advertising sales network. I'm going to aggregate a bunch of websites together, and that's what I'm focused on. And as a result, I was able to grow it significantly. And then the timing. Timing is everything. And if you look at one interesting stat that I think might help people to understand the power of timing, if you look at massive increases in wealth among the top business executives in the world, the interesting thing is over time, they were, for the most part, born at the same time. If you look at Carnegie, Rockefeller, and JP Morgan, they were all born between 1835 to 1839. And then Gates, Jobs, and Dell were born between 1955 and 1965 because it was the rise of the computer. The previous gentleman that we talked about is the rise of the industrial age. And then you take a look at the internet age. You know, Larry Page, Sergey Brin were born in 1973, Mark Zuckerberg 1984. So that's obviously the rise of the internet. So one key thing that I would advise is pick an industry that has massive growth potential because a rising tide lifts all boats. The other thing is focus on your niche within that industry and don't waver. It's got to be something you like. It doesn't have to be something you love. Everybody says, do what you're really passionate about and the money will come. Well, yeah, that's not necessarily true. You got to be interested in it, but it doesn't have to be your core passion. If you love golf, then golf on the weekends or something. The key is to pick things that are on the rise and to drill in and focus. And over my 25, 30-year career, I've launched a lot of side projects, which honestly has been a mistake because most of the side projects didn't work out. I launched an early YouTube when YouTube started. I launched a live at home channel during COVID, which still has a lot of legs and potential, but it didn't work out to the way I wanted it to. I launched a mask company during COVID as well. That didn't quite work out. But with the failures comes, more vision, and now the creator economy focus is actually booming right now.
That's fantastic. It's a great way to be forward thinking. Make sure that the timing is right. You have to strike while the iron is hot. These opportunities aren't going to stick around. And again, successful people are going to have a lot of failures behind them, side projects that just didn't work out, I myself included. But it's all about staying focused and continuing through and actually, deciding what is my passion? How can I help people? Because there's the difference between your vision or your passion. What is it that I enjoy helping people? I can help people in many different ways. Just because you love golf doesn't mean you should create a golf e-commerce store. It just may not line up. Go golf on the weekends. It's a great point. John, thank you so much for all of your insight. Are there any books, podcasts, YouTube channels you think other people should check out or mentors that have been inspiring to you and you think that would be helpful in other people's journey?
100%. I'm a big fan of Ed Milet. You may have heard him. He has an amazing podcast for wellness, which I'm also a huge fan and follow. Peter Attia is quite amazing. I'm always a big fan of Tony Robbins. He's always has a number of content. He's oldie but a goodie. Who am I listening to recently? Those are the main people that I'm listening to. Of course, Tim Ferriss always has a lot of good things to say. Matthew McConaughey and Tony Robbins put together a lot of great content. I love watching McConaughey present. He has a whole series of self-help stuff. And then obviously from a marketing and advertising perspective, Adweek, Ad Age are really are goodies. And yeah, there's a lot out there. I'm reading a lot of different books right now, but those would be
No,
the main ones.
that's perfect. I was hoping for just a list of people you would recommend because sometimes we connect with different people or their message resonates with us better. So it's important to have some options to choose from. Now, for those of you who are listening and interested in chatting with John, finding out more about him, we will have links available down in the description and the comment and show notes. So make sure you get connected, follow him for all the great advice and tips and tricks and AI tools that he's going to be sharing. John, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. Congratulations on your past success, current and future success. We appreciate it.
Appreciate you, Chris. Thank you so much for having me.